What's one little tiny thing we're not told that we don't have and will never get? The reign of God. Blessed are those who never mourn. Don't mourn. Don't grieve. In fact, no, that doesn't get what the culture is saying. Blessed are you if you cause people to mourn. Now we're getting somewhere. Making all the kids in Afghanistan cry because the drones are killing them. This is power. We just never told the one thing is that we shall not be comforted. Blessed are the violent, the arrogant, the proud, those who dominate, those who run the domination system. This is God. Everything is ours, man. It's just, you'll never inherit the earth. You have nothing to do with creation. The earth itself is going to reject you. Blessed are you if you hunger and thirst for injustice. It gets better and better. The 1% of the 1% to steal everything. We're 4.7% of the world's population. We control, 60% of the world's natural resources. I mean, Iran, Iraq, Yemen, Pakistan, Afghanistan, it's to steal the remaining oil. Anyway, so forth. But it's just we're never told we will never be satisfied. Blessed are those who show no mercy. Whatever you do, don't show mercy to them. There's always someone. Don't be merciful to. Well, I wrote out a list. We could come up with a whole list of people. Victims, poor people, oppressed people, marginalized people, women, children, the elderly, the homeless, the outcast, the refugee, the hungry, the enemy, the unborn, the prisoner, those on death row, anyone different from us, anyone we don't like, no mercy to them. Yet the culture of war and killing never tells us the spiritual consequences of mercilessness. You shall not be shown mercy. Blessed are the impure of heart. It's very interesting to reflect. I think in this country, what we're going through in a celebrity culture, TV, as long as you look good, that's the main thing. You go to church on Sunday, you do your job, and who cares if inside you're full of hate and violence? Really, it doesn't matter. No one knows what's going on in anybody's inside. You hate yourself, you hate your family, bomb and kill all those people, those horrible people far away. Don't let them across the border, whatever. Impurity of heart. But we're not told what happens when you go deep into that. Which is you're full of darkness. Which means you have no vision. Which means you can't see. Which means you can't see one another. Which means you'll never see God. Blessed are the war makers. That is the message of the church of war to the world. And it's in every country in the whole world, the religious communities siding with killing or telling their government, this is God's will. Kill those horrible people. This is what I hear. What I hear our priests and ministers saying. And it's a terrible sickness. Those who make war, fund war, build weapons for war, send our young people to march off to war, hold up the false spirituality of war, the myth of redemptive violence, stir up war, name people as enemies so that we can kill them and then steal their stuff and continue our imperial domination of the planet. They shall be called what? That's a powerful thing to ponder. The sons and daughters of the culture of war. When I was in prison with Philip Berrigan after we hammered on a nuclear weapon and we were facing 20 years in prison with a little cell, I remember, I'll never forget, one day I was saying this to Phil. I said, what do you think this means? And he said, the sons and daughters, blessed are the war makers, they are the sons and daughters of the bomb. The sons and daughters of death. We don't want to be like that, but I think that was really helpful. Blessed are you if you are never in trouble for working for justice. You're not persecuted because you are fighting for justice. You're going right along with the culture of injustice. Congratulations, everything is great. You're comfortable, you're safe, nobody's mad at you, you're not in trouble with your job or the church, you're not involved in the struggle, you're quiet, you don't hear the cry of the poor, You pay for this system of injustice continue. The reign of this world is ours. We've made it. What more could you want? There's just this one little thing where you don't have the reign of God. Well, I don't know if you found that helpful, but I find that very helpful. It kind of clarifies what Jesus is talking about. St. Francis said, if you want to understand Jesus, you have to remember that he turns everything upside down, so you might as well stand on your head for the rest of your life. That's what Francis of Assisi said. I'll read to you from the Gospel of Matthew, the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. Chapter 5, verse 1. When he saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, the disciples came to him, and he began to teach them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn. They will be comforted. Blessed are the meek. They will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice. They will be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful. They will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart. They will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers. They will be called the daughters and sons of God. And blessed are those persecuted for the sake of justice. The reign of heaven is theirs. And blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of evil against you falsely because of me. Rejoice and be glad. Your reward will be great in heaven. They persecuted the prophets just that way before you. So what I would propose is maybe I'll just walk through them, say a few things, and then we could talk about a little of this, if that sounds okay. Does that sound okay to everybody? So, I mean, I don't know what any of this means, and that Gandhi read this every morning and every evening to live his life in the spirit of the Sermon on the Mount. He said, that's how I'm going to follow Jesus. I think blessed are the poor in spirit means then everything we can think it means. It's certainly about the economics of the reign of God. Those who have no money. The UN says 1 billion people are starving to death. 3.5 billion people living in subhuman conditions. So it's a call to total downward mobility, which means, just to cut to the chase, for me, we're on the journey to death. And this is Jesus on the journey to the cross where you have nothing. So it's a call to let go of everything. Possessions, power, prestige, pride, everything. Interior riches and our material possessions. Downward mobility. That's, I think, the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. But the reign of God is already there for those who are marginalized and poor. Because Christ is with them already in Matthew 25. I spent the morning with my friend and teacher, Vincent Harding, and he said, I don't know what the problem is. Here's what he said to me. People want to know where God is. Matthew 25 says, I'm with the hungry, the thirsty, those in prison, the sick, the dying, the marginalized. So that's, blessed are the poor in spirit. The reign of God is theirs. And that's our journey, to go deep into poverty in every which way, even voluntary poverty. We can talk about that. And that's the journey of self-denying and self-emptying kenosis that Paul talks about until it's the cross, and welcoming the reign of God. So it's a call to live in solidarity with the poor, share our lives and personal relationships with the poor, let go of our power, control, and domination, and to taste maybe their poverty of spirit. A friend of mine who spent his whole life with the homeless said to me, I just hope that one day a homeless person's going to, some of it will rub off on me, that they will for a second give me what they already know and live in, the reign of God. That's my experience from homeless, working in soup kitchens, shelters, going to prison, living in war zones around the world, that I've experienced the reign of God there. Blessed are those who mourn, they shall be comforted. I was with Daniel Bergen when I was a kid, and he gave a day of retreat on peacemaking. This was his opening sentence. Peacemaking begins with grief. I never heard anybody say that. And I was like, I must be at the wrong workshop. This sounds, I'm trying to make you laugh, but it's not working. What does nonviolence and peace mean? Well, every human being on the planet is your sister and brother. And as you go deep into the truth of our common shared unity, our oneness with all humanity, all creation and the Creator, we're grieving because we just killed 1.4 million sisters and brothers in Iraq. And we're bombing so many people in Afghanistan, and there's 1 billion people starving to death. There's this unjust system. So we're people who are mourning all the time the death of our sisters and brothers around the planet. Friends, this is the emotional life, as well as the spiritual life that Jesus is teaching us right at the beginning. I could go on at length about this, because we're angry people, especially those who care for peace and justice. And if you get to the first antithesis in the Sermon on the Mount, it says, hey, y'all, you've heard it said, thou shalt not kill, but I say to you, don't even get angry. That's why I always think Jesus is smoking a cigarette, because that's just such an outrageous thing. It's so politically incorrect. He's saying that's, at the roots of your violence, you're wounded and so forth. Well, none of us pay attention to that teaching. And the teaching, by the way, leads up in the first antithesis. The commandment is katagalite, go and be reconciled with those you've hurt. Here he gives us a positive emotion to cultivate as peacemakers. Grief. Powerful. I went to Iraq. I invited all the Nobel Peace Prize winners on an all-expense-paid trip to Iraq 10 years ago. That was quite an experience, and we were going to meet Saddam and everything. Nearly all of them turned me down. One Nobel prominent laureate said to me on the phone, well, if we meet Saddam, I'll kill him myself with my bare hands. And I said, you won the Nobel Peace Prize. Anyway. And I went with Kathy Kelly. I hope everybody here in this room knows who she is. To me, maybe the great peacemaker of our generation. She led 25, 30 delegations to, Iraq. She now goes every 3 months to Afghanistan. And, I got a phone call with her from her last month. She goes, look, I planned your trip. You're going on December 1st. You can stay at this house. I'm going to, and there are going to be armed guards watching you, and you have to do this and this and this, and I gotta go. Good luck on the trip. It was like getting orders from a general. Anyway, we're walking down the streets of Baghdad with the prestigious Nobel laureates. This was 10 years ago. We were mobbed. Thousands of Iraqis. Kathy Kelly is here. It was like being with Princess Diana or Julia Roberts or somebody. And nobody in the United States knows it. But in Iraq, there's one person who loves us. Well, it was a life-changing experience, and I could tell you a lot about it. But afterwards, and Kathy was my dear friend, and I said to her once, it was a horrible trip. And all the people we met are dead. All the leading people we met, we were the highest delegation ever to go in Iraq in 10 years. The great Margaret Hassan was the one. She had a dinner party for us. She was the head of care. You remember she was beheaded in 2004. He said, Kathy, how do you do it? This is such a hard thing. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell her I told you her answer. This is very powerful teaching. I take time regularly to grieve and mourn. Every few days, I sit while others are saying their prayers. I weep. Blessed are those who mourn, they shall be comforted. If you love humanity, you are grieving, and Jesus is a person of grief. That's all the great peacemakers. Blessed are the meek. That's the biblical word for nonviolence, Thomas Merton said. But what's so powerful here, Jesus talking about biblical meekness, meaning creative nonviolence in our sense, this is why it's so weird. Okay, nonviolence, that's wonderful, beautiful. What do you mean? They shall inherit the earth. Well, we could talk, this is Matthew, the Jewish community, the promised land. This is really rich Jewish tradition. I think, as I look at the life of St. Francis and Mahatma Gandhi, let's say two of the greatest peacemakers, practicing spectacular visionary act of nonviolence, what are they doing? We now know that Francis lived outdoors the last 18 years of his life. And Gandhi slept outdoors about the last 25 years of his life. They were totally in touch with creation. And as in our world of violence, here we are with total global warming destroying the earth, we see that there's no connection. But Jesus is making that connection. I hope you all can go and figure that out. That's what I find so interesting these days about this beatitude. This connection between biblical meekness and nonviolence and inheriting, being one with all of creation. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice. Wow. How much do we hunger and thirst for justice? Such loaded words. So helpful. And what does this mean? they shall be satisfied. I hope it means we will have the victories of justice. I want to end all wars, nuclear weapons, executions, racism, sexism, poverty, starvation, and violence of all forms, and protect all the earth and have total nonviolence. How does that sound? Yeah. I don't think it's going to happen, but you don't know. Okay, we want victories of justice, but the teaching is they shall be satisfied. My translation is that if you give your life to the struggle for justice, you will find ultimate meaning in your life. That's been really helpful to me. This is the most meaningful thing we can do with the remainder of our time on earth, is to share in Jesus' struggle for justice. And while we work for justice on one hand, we're people of infinite mercy on the other. It's so rich. Blessed are the merciful, they shall be shown mercy. To have mercy to everybody, especially those we're not supposed to have mercy to, and then to those who have hurt us, to break the cycle of vengeance and retaliation, and to be people of compassion and forgiveness and letting everybody off the hook and granting general clemency to every human being, and mercy and mercy and mercy. Remember Thomas Merton's definition of God? The last sentence of the book he wrote, The Sign of Jonas. Have you caught sight of me? Mercy within mercy within mercy. And what goes around comes around. Those who show mercy will be shown mercy. It's just an infinitely rich teaching. And while we're hungry and thirsting for justice, and while we're showing mercy, what? Blessed are the pure of heart. What does that mean? The best I can make it means is that we have to have disarmed, nonviolent hearts, cultivating interior nonviolence. Well, that means we have to look deeply at our own inner violence. It was very interesting throughout his whole life. This was the verse that Gandhi wrote about most in his private secret letters, to his best friends. I have no idea how to have a pure heart because my heart is so impure. What do I do? And, it's just constantly reflecting on the violence within. Thich Nhat Hanh says, well, this is my translation of it. He has this beautiful phrase, just look deeply. You don't want to beat yourself up. Okay, I'm full of violence. I mean, we're all for peace, of course. Don't get me wrong. But deep down, there's someone we'd really like to get, That's the good stuff, Thich Nhat Hanh says. Look deeply at what's going on. Why am I doing that? How can I move on to a second thought and be nonviolent to that person? How do I cultivate interior nonviolence? Then you want to beat yourself up because you're just so horrible, and you want to non-cooperate with your own inner violence, and it's an interior journey of nonviolence. But Jesus puts together this very powerful metaphor, image for him, which runs through the Gospels, of light. If you are cultivating interior nonviolence, which was at the heart of Gandhi's secret life. Merton's essay on Gandhi is the greatest thing ever written about. Gandhi's life, this is Merton's phrase, was the fruit of an inner unity already realized. I don't know what the heck he's talking about. Merton, that is. He's saying we activists are going to go out and unify everybody. Merton says Gandhi worked on his own unification and therefore helped change the world. If you allow God to disarm your heart, the light of God begins to fill your heart. The darkness is dispelled. There's like an inner dawn happening, which means you get to see someone, oh, you're my brother, you're my sister. And I'm saying the definition of nonviolence is every human being is your brother and sister. Well, everybody in this room, we're sisters and brothers of infinitely going to spend eternity together. But then we see God. Blessed are the pure of heart, they shall see God. And all of this is today. That's infinitely rich. Blessed are the peacemakers. I remember I was speaking to a crowd once, and this woman about 6 years ago, as we were waging the war in Iraq, she said, oh, John, this is just fabulous stuff. Me personally, I'm a big fan of peace. I'm a big fan of peace. Really. But sometimes you just got to kill somebody. Blessed are not those who like peace, We're all for peace, but actually make peace in a world of war. Which means we got to work to end all these wars and get at the roots of the wars, which is poverty, and abolishing poverty and hunger and disease, which leads to such violence and insanity. How do we make peace? As I reflect on this, I'm not sure. I don't know. I invite you to ponder this. But one idea is to look at your life as you go home. You look back all the way to your childhood. How have you been a peacemaker? It's a great question. How have you moved out of the culture of war? Which is, when you were a kid, getting beat up by your parents, or your brothers and sisters, or your friends at school, or you were part of World War II, or the Vietnam War, or the Iraq War, or El Salvador, wherever. And when did the journey of peace and nonviolence begin for you? And how, from this day forward, can we go forward to be peacemakers for the rest of our lives? This is the climax of the Beatitudes. Now, this is to me what is so ultimately shocking, and it only hit me about 3 years ago, and I'm trying to spend the next 5 years writing a book on this because I don't understand it, and it's so absolutely amazing to me. What would you say a peacemaker is? I led a retreat a couple of months ago, and I put that question in. There were 1,000 people, most beautiful statements. And I said, you love, working for justice, stopping the war in Afghanistan, all this other stuff. And Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers. They are the sons and the daughters of the God of peace. Friends, I invite you to ponder that for the rest of your lives. It's the most radical, powerful teaching. If that's true, it changes everything. And the culture of war is always telling us who we are. You're a good American. You're a Republican, or a Democrat, or a conservative, or a liberal, or whatever. No. You're a teacher, or you're a nurse, or you're a preacher, or I'm a housewife, or I'm this or that. And it's identity. Merton was going on and on about this true self, getting to the core of who we are. You really want to be all you can be? Does that ring a bell? The commercials in the 1970s of the United States Marines. Go and kill for the empire. This is the most you can be as a human being. When I entered the Jesuits, they take you off and send you into a 30-day silent retreat and brainwash you right from the start. That's what the spiritual exercises. My question as a 21-year-old kid was, who am I? And I think this is the answer. Jesus, the nonviolent Jesus, the first one who comes along and tells us who we are. You are the daughter of the creator of the entire universe. You're the son of the God of peace. And it's so shocking because we can go, okay, Jesus, you are the Son of God. And my book is going to be, how did he practice peace? How was he the most perfect nonviolent person who ever lived? And I think I figured it out. Because he's sitting by the River Jordan, you know the answer. And the voice says, you're my beloved. And he said, that's good enough to go on. And he's claimed his identity as the beloved of God. He goes in the desert. What does the voice of the culture of war say? Oh yeah, you think you're the Son of God? Prove it. Do something. Turn these stones. Throw yourself, till he dies on the cross. Oh, you think you're the Son of God? Come down from that cross. He claimed it. And because he lived in relationship with the God of peace, he could practice perfect nonviolence and speak out and love everyone. That's the spirituality of peace and nonviolence in this one beatitude. Isn't that fantastic? And if you read the climax of the Sermon on the Mount, up to the 6th antithesis, you have heard it said, love your countrymen and hate your enemies. But I say to you, love your enemies. You're reading that. It's the most radical, revolutionary words in all of human writing. And I only got an answer from this from Martin Luther King. I used to say to myself as a kid, okay, Jesus, maybe, but why? And Martin Luther King, this is my impression of Martin Luther King. Jesus does not say to love your enemies because it is the moral position to take, even though it is. Jesus does not say love your enemies because it's the right thing to do. even though we all know deep down it is. Jesus does not say, love your enemies, read Dr. King, because it's the philosophic good to be done, even though it is. And he says so brilliantly, Jesus doesn't say love your enemies because it's the only practical political solution left for the planet, although it is. Killing enemies, we're going to kill up the whole planet. We're going to destroy ourselves. Why? Well, friends, we already heard the answer at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. Love your enemies. Then you're really the sons and daughters of God, who lets the sun shine in the good and the bad, and the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. Oh my gosh. And here are this most political teachings. Blessed are the peacemakers. Love your enemies. Not only does he tell us who we are, our vocation, what it means to be a human being, he explains the nature of the mystery of divinity. It's the only time he talks about God. I'm just saying. I don't think he's very pious, this Jesus. He doesn't. Here he says, God is a peacemaker. God loves universally. This changes everything. And Gandhi got this. And I get it now because he read the Sermon on the Mount and we don't. What is your image of God? Do you worship a God of war or a God of peace? A God who loves us and hates and kills enemies, or a God, unfortunately, of universal nonviolent love, who loves the people we don't like? This is exciting and at the heart of social change. Well, once you stand up for peace in a world of total permanent war, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. Blessed are those persecuted for the struggle for justice. The reign of God is yours. This is so exciting. Dorothy Day said, the measure of your discipleship to the nonviolent Jesus is how much trouble you're in. I hope you're all in a lot of trouble. You're getting persecuted left and right. People are not going to thank you, celebrate you, honor you for working for justice and peace. You're going to be put down, harassed, persecuted, marginalized, lose your jobs, get kicked out of your churches, and then arrested and jailed, and if you're really good, killed. Then Jesus says, blessed are you when they utter every kind of name against you falsely and insult you, persecute you because of me. Rejoice and be glad. Your reward is great. And you get to be like Dorothy Day. You get to be Gandhi and Martin Luther King, just like the prophets. Isn't that exciting? Yes. This is what we want to do. In the Lucan version, he says, when they insult you, leap for joy. In the Greek, the word is start dancing. We should all be dancing because we're in so much trouble in our work for justice. I'm trying to be positive here, but, forgive me for being a name dropper, but I know Archbishop Tutu really well, and he's just embarrassing. He just laughs and dances at the drop of a hat. And it's only taken me recently to realize he's been getting 15 death threats a day since he was 13 years old. He's living this Beatitudes. So I just invite you to reflect. How have you been living the Beatitudes throughout your life? How can we be Beatitude people? Especially, how can we be peacemakers who work for justice in this world of war and injustice? And did you read the great book from the Oxford University Press a couple years ago? I'm almost tempted to say that this book came out and said, everything I've just said is wrong. It's the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, translated from the Aramaic, which is the language Jesus spoke, which is not written down. That's all the rage right now in Scripture scholars. And all they've studied, really, is the Beatitudes and the Our Father. Did you know this? From the Aramaic. And you know what the Aramaic says? It's not blessed are, which it's definitely not happy are. Don't ever use that phrase. But there's some patronizing thing about, oh, you're nice, blessed are you, or isn't she nice? In the Aramaic, the translation is about 5 different words. Get up, arise, stand up, walk on, and walk forth. Now that sounds like the nonviolent Jesus speaking to Galilean peasants on the outskirts of an evil empire. Walk forth, you poor in spirit, you who are mourning because of the empire, you meek and holy nonviolent people. Carry on, walk on, you who are hungering and thirsting for justice, you merciful people, you who are pure in heart. Arise, Walk on, you holy peacemakers, you persecuted for justice and peace. You are the daughters and sons of the God of peace. The reign of God is yours. That's my hope and prayer for all of you. Thanks for listening, everybody. We have a few minutes for comments and questions and clarifications and rebuttal. Maybe just stand up and speak real loud, or if you want.
I just want to say, from a 5-year-old who asked me about
Real loud.
was asking me about the government, I wanted to know who was in charge of the Department of Peace.
Who was in charge?
Department of Peace. A 5-year-old asked me.
Oh, it's a good question. We should put him in charge. No comments? Yeah, in the back. Real loud. Real loud. Oh, the question, I think, was this. She was just saying that a 5-year-old once said to her, who's in charge of the Department of Peace? So we were, Jeff.
Could you comment on, is there a window for the peace movement, for the conscientious among us with the drone activity? To my mind, the drone wars, as we're now seeing them happen, it's a tick down in a culture of honor, which the military claims to purport. Do you see any window there for a consciousness to come via the drone situation?
Well, thanks for asking. The question is about the drones. My friend is this writer, Jeremy Scahill, and he says the future of the world is drones. And that's why Kathy Kelly and I went to Creech Air Force Base, the headquarters of the drones, a couple years ago, and crossed the line and were arrested and went through an incredible trial and faced a year in prison. And now there's protests happening. I don't even know how to talk about it. Have you been to the far desert of Nevada, where there's a building smaller than this room, where these young kids work on these like video games, and they're directing the drone planes. We saw them flying over the desert. These were really black planes, full of gasoline, loaded with bombs, and all the wings covered with cameras to photograph at 35,000 feet and even the face of someone, and they're flying 10,000 miles away, and there's no human being on them. And I read that Oxford report about a year and a half ago, which said 9 out of 10 drone bombing raids miss and kill civilians. I mean, Obama's killed hundreds and hundreds of little kids from supposed drones. This is, Ramsey Clark, I said at our trial, this is total extrajudicial assassination, as now Obama's talking about, as if this is the new normal. Well, Jeremy says soon the whole world will be surrounded by drones. There'll be drones flying over here all the time, and we have to organize about that. I'm not so sure, Jeff, because living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, at the foot of Los Alamos, on the top of that building where the atomic bomb was built, business is booming. Obama tried to put billions more into Los Alamos, much more than George W. Bush, even though he won the Nobel Peace Prize, because we've been monitoring this. And actually, I mean, how much do you want to know? Because locally, I moved there to be part of what's going on, find out the birthplace of the bomb. They're on a race to get rid of nuclear weapons and to come up with something even better, which is way beyond drones. And if I told you what they're doing, it'll totally freak you out. And I don't want to depress you all. So it's all bad, and it's all one, and it's all death as a social methodology. It's idolatry. And it's so wonderful, Obama and Bush say, our war makers, because, you know, our guys aren't being killed. You know, we're just bombing their children. Oh, we made a few mistakes, but it's all destroying us too. And of course, it's all going to come back upon us. There's going to be drones upon all of the United States in the future. I mean, but it's a future of war and killing and total destruction, unless we live out our vocation to be sons and daughters of the God of peace. So I just invite you, Jeff, to stay with your question. Another comment or two. Yeah, real loud.
Will you tell us what they're doing?
Scalar waves. Yeah. wave motions. You don't actually have a bomb, and they think China has already tested it. I mean, this is what I learned, and what the heck do I know? I try not to learn. But you would send this force through the earth. Shock waves that'll come, let's say, we could hope, knock everybody in Iraq, 25 million people out, paralyze 25 million people for 72 hours. That ought to teach them. That's what they're trying to do. They're having problems fine-tuning it. It's not, I don't mean to be flippant and funny, I'm sorry, it so freaks me out. Because look at these beautiful teachings. So, I don't understand what it has to do with wave motions. Wave motion.
But that's right there. Yeah.
Huh?
Isn't that one of the waves? There are two waves in an earthquake, and one of them is the sphere.
Maybe, but I don't think it has to do with that. It's a different kind of physics. But it's death, and it's really scary, and a lot of people with a lot of money are working on these things. And Jeremy says drones are the future. I'm not sure. I think a lot of people are working on with greater ways to come up with war. And you and I have to figure out greater ways to practice nonviolence and be peacemakers. We have to go way beyond Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. Have we resolved everything? No, thank you for one or two other comments. I think we have. Over there, stand up real loud.
With November approaching, how much will peace have to do with who you vote for and who you don't?
Well, you know, I'm an ex-con. I can never vote again for the rest of my life because I hammered on a nuclear weapon. I thought like that was a good thing to do. So I can't vote. My phone is monitored. I'm not allowed to go to a lot of countries. I'm very clearly watched. I get discussions regularly at the airport. So I don't get too excited or interested in electoral politics. I don't mean to be flippant, but I really highly encourage you to spend some time in prison for working for peace. It clarifies your relationship with the government. St. Paul, your St. Paul talks a lot about, I thought we were supposed to be citizens first and foremost of the kingdom of God. I don't mean to be flippant, but I only got a minute left, so I'm just going to cut to the chase. So, this is way beyond electoral politics, way beyond the church. This is what some of the speakers have said. You know, Jim Wallace and I and our friends would have different takes on all of this. God bless Jim and all, but it's not my struggle. And Jim would agree with what I'm about to say. How does change happen? Historically, movement building. Jesus builds a movement of peace and nonviolence. I'm convinced that's what he was, a movement organizer. And he was brilliant. And if you study our own history, the abolitionists, the suffragists, the labor movement, the civil rights movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, the beginnings of the environmental and now a global peace movement, it all happens through ground-up, bottom-up organizing, and some people leading the way finally through civil disobedience. So I'm interested in that. And I want to encourage you to be part of building a movement to work for the abolition of war itself and poverty and nuclear weapons and destruction of the environment, and transforming this world of war into a new world of nonviolence. So that, I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. Jim would say, no, the lesser of two evils. I'm tired of that. I want to spend my short time on earth trying with you and everybody to teach and promote the Sermon on the Mount. I think that means we're living in an empire, and it's way beyond anything that the media for the culture of war is telling us about. So that's why I'm here today, is to be with you and encourage you to be these people, to continue Jesus' movement work. By the way, can I tell a story? Howard Zinn, the great historian, author of A People's History of the United States. He's my friend, and we had lunch shortly before he died, and he said, I've been studying the movement. He invented the history of studying social movement, and I've studied all of them for 40 years. And he really had the abolitionists, the suffragists, the labor movement, the civil rights movement, the anti-Vietnam War. And he says, I finally realized that all of the movements have one thing in common from the beginning, the middle, right to the very end. Every one of them was hopeless, hopeless, hopeless. I said, thanks a lot, Howard. That's really encouraging me. And he then said, and then there was this big breakthrough of hope. And I thought, why? And he said, I went back and studied it. And there's an answer. There's an answer. Because good people, ordinary people, worked for justice and peace, did their thing every day for the cause, for the struggle, and they never gave up, even though there was no way they were going to live to see the change happen in their lifetimes. They did it anyway. That's the message of the Beatitudes. Walk forth. Do the good because it's good. Do what's right because it's right. And as Merton said, leave the results, the outcome, in the hands of the God of peace. It's a gift to us. Our job is to be faithful to the movement. And then Zinn went on and said, then I realized that every administration was terrified secretly of a movement that won't go away. Let's not go away. Let's be Beatitude people. I'll be over signing my books over there. Thank you for listening to me. Have a wonderful weekend here. God bless you.